Welcome, everybody, to the very first edition of the Graph Community Podcast. I'm quite excited to have you, and I'm pretty happy that you have tuned in into this new podcast series, and I'm quite excited where this episode is going. So, at the very beginning, I think it's pretty interesting to discuss what this podcast is all about. Basically, this is a place for the community where we are going to discuss everything that happened in the Graph ecosystem during the last weeks and in the last months. And in the long run, and to be quite honest with you, I'm dreaming a little bit here. We're planning on inviting a couple of interesting people from the ecosystem to the show, like interviews with popular indexers. And I already told you that I'm dreaming a little bit here. Perhaps we could even invite some team members to this show. Let's see what the future holds for this podcast and what this podcast develops into. I'm sitting right here comfortably on my couch. It is already dark outside where I'm located at, and in the last couple of minutes it rained quite a bit here, but the rain has now stopped, which is a little bit sad because it would have made for some pretty nice ambient noise for this podcast. But you can't have everything as they say, so I'm pretty happy with the way things are. So basically, what happened so far with the Graph protocol? In 2020, and I think it's no exaggeration to say that 2020 came to quite an exciting end with the launch of the long-anticipated Graph mainnet. The mainnet was launched to the end of 2020, and we saw thousands of transactions for the first time in the Graph network on the Ethereum mainnet, on the Ethereum blockchain. And curators and indexers got their very first rewards just as much. Investors got their very first tokens. And another thing that is quite interesting to look at is that we saw the community grow exponentially. So we saw, if you're part of the Discord server, you did not only see a lot of blue names and a lot of pink and a lot of orange names, but you also saw quite an influx of a lot of white names, which is pretty good for the entire ecosystem, that we are growing this massively and that the community interest in this project is this large. And I think at the moment the Discord server has a couple of thousands of members and it's growing. And hats off to the team who were confronted with a massive amount of emails and a massive amount of requests in all public communication forums you can imagine, and they handled it pretty well, especially if you consider that all these questions and the mainnet launch happened during the holiday season. We had Christmas and we had Sylvester celebrations going on when all these questions came in from all the community members. So I think the team handled this part really exceptionally well. And maybe even more importantly, it was quite astonishing to see how quickly the GRT token was listed on a large number of exchanges, among them Coinbase and Binance. So if you have been following the project for a couple of months or even years now, it wasn't too surprising for you that Coinbase listed GRT tokens almost immediately after the launch of the mainnet. Because as you all know, that Coinbase Ventures invested into the Graph. They gave them some pretty important seed funding. So they are directly invested into the project, and obviously it was just a matter of time until Coinbase listed these tokens. Obviously, Binance followed suit, and we saw the Graph token trade in late December. And if you have watched the price action, I think the ICO price was at 3 cents per token, and it did a massive pump into the stratosphere, and I think it was trading shortly at 80 cents until it started its decline and found a support level at around 30 cents. So let's jump into the next section of the podcast, which is entitled Council and Grants. So pretty recently it was announced by the Graph that the Graph Council was inaugurated, and the council members were announced with a blog post. And at the beginning, the council will consist of 10 people, and they are using a 6 of 10 multisig with 5 stakeholder groups that are represented in the council, which are indexers, users, backers, researchers, and the initial team. And basically the council functions as a representative sample of stakeholders across multiple organizations with varying viewpoints and incentives. For example, you have the indexers, who obviously are interested in having a lot of high quality subgraphs on the network that they can index, just as much as you have early backers who may have quite a different perspective to the entire ecosystem and may have quite different incentives. So this is pretty exciting. This is a pretty exciting topic because we can see how the Graph Council is going to evolve over the next couple years, because this is not set in stone. So the team already mentioned that they want the council or the entire governance process to further iterate and to further decentralize, and they are aiming to increase the representation via nested multisigs or even a DAO. And this is quite interesting to see how this entire governance process develops. And as a suggestion to the team, I would like to propose that not only indexers but also community members and delegators and curators should be listed in this council. And again, I'm not in a position to tell the team anything, but this is just a humble suggestion from the community to include more community members in this council. Because at the moment we have indexers, sure, we have researchers, we have users, we have backers, and we have the initial team, but we don't have a voice in this council by community members. So this is going to be pretty interesting to see how the dynamic in the council is going to play out, and whether or not the team is going to list some community members into the council. But as you all know, the team is pretty open to suggestions, and they have shown in the past that they absolutely listen to the community and are willing to take suggestions from the community. This is the reason why I'm proposing this, and maybe we can get this going. Maybe you can tell me what you think about this suggestion in the comment section below, and just send me or shoot me a short line whether you agree with me or disagree with me, and the reasons why, because I would be really interesting, or I should rather say I would be really interested to hear from you what you think about this entire proposal. So I think next we should discuss the 10 council members we have on board, and we have some pretty interesting names that are going to represent these various stakeholder groups. So from the indexers we got Jim Cousins and Gary Morris from Staking Facilities. We have Justin Moses from Synthetics, and please forgive me if I'm misspelling this name, but we have Kayvon Tiranian from the foundation, who represent the users. But we also got from the researcher side Santiago Palladino from Open Zeppelin and Yondon Fu from LivePeer on board. Next we got Michael Anderson from Framebrook Ventures and Spencer Noon from DTC Capital, who are joining the council to represent the backers. And last but not least, we have Brendan Ramirez and Yaniv Tal from the initial team, who are obviously representing the entire Graph team. And this makes up the entire council for now. So with the integration of the council, it was also announced by the team that the Graph Grants program is launched. And what the Grants program is intended to do is that they want to support network participants and the community. So the goal of the Grants program is to encourage development on the Graph network and tooling. They want to encourage collaboration with third-party developers. They want to expand the usage of subgraphs, and they want to grow the community of network participants. And now listen carefully, because this is really important. 20% of the total GRT supply has been allocated to the Graph Foundation that will vest over 10 years. So basically what this means is that we have 20% of the total supply, which is 1 billion, that is going to be released over a time span of 10 years for grants. So this is a huge topic, and this is a huge amount of money that is flowing into the ecosystem to foster the development on the ecosystem and the adoption of the ecosystem. Now you can do the math with the recent price of the GRT token. This is a large sum of money that is going to be released for community projects, which is, in my opinion, quite exciting. And the Graph also noted in their blog that they plan on distributing round about 1% of GRT in the very first year of the Graph Grants program, which is 2021. So in the very first quarter and in the next weeks or months, we will see a distribution of 1% of GRT tokens for the Graph Grants program, in order to support third-party developers, indexers, curators, and other contributors. So if you are a developer, if you are technically minded, if you are a marketer, if you are a community builder, a whatever, if you have any special skills, it is really advisable to apply for a grant. Just make a suggestion to the Graph team what you could contribute to the network and apply for a grant. And this is where the Graph Council comes in, because all applications will be checked by the team, and specifically checked, I think, by the Graph Foundation, which is spearheaded by Eva. And all financial grants will be subject to a vote by the Graph Council. And this is where, for example, the 6 of 10 multisig comes into play, because the Graph Council will basically decide whether or not a grant is given to a specific project that is going to develop a particular tool for the ecosystem, which is quite exciting. And so you need 6 of these 10 people that I already mentioned from the council behind your idea, and you will receive a grant. And to start, the Graph Grants program will disperse funding in multiple waves. And the first wave of grants and the first grants of the network will be paid out in the first quarter of 2021. What is also interesting is that the Graph is planning on evolving this entire grants program, so they will take the community feedback, they will analyze, they will discuss, and they will improve upon the grants program to make it even more flexible, even more adaptable in the future. And I found it interesting that they have mentioned 4 categories in this blog post that they want to focus on: the development, which is protocol infrastructure, tooling, decentralized applications, and community developments. So if you have any special skills in the area of protocol reward calculators, indexer agent strategies, unit testing frameworks, subgraph features, or even educational initiatives, feel free to apply for a grant from the Graph. So let's just jump into the next section of the podcast, where we are going to discuss the latest news regarding the Graph community and ecosystem. If you are part of the Discord server, you may have already noticed that many of the team members that we are interacting with on a daily basis, like Tegan, Brandon, Janice, or Martin, are now labeled as Edge and Node team members. So you may have noticed it, but you may have already asked yourself the question, what is that all about? So let's discuss Edge and Node in the following section. Basically what Edge and Node is, it is the official Graph organization. So the team has decided that they want to spin out from the Graph protocol into a separate entity, which is Edge and Node, and they want to continue providing their services to this entity, to the entire protocol, and they will be involved in the protocol. So basically what this means is that the team has launched or initiated the very first step towards decentralization, which means they have stepped aside from the protocol. They are now providing services to this protocol, but they have handed over the protocol to the community, which is quite an important step and which is quite good news from a decentralization perspective, because now we have the protocol in the hands of the community, and with the open source code, the community can decide in which direction this protocol is going to evolve. This is the very first organization in the Graph network that is important. We have also, on the other hand, the Graph Foundation, which I already mentioned is spearheaded by Eva Balin, and we have the Graph Council that we already discussed in this podcast. So we have these 3 entities that are going to decide, or that are going to direct the future of the entire protocol, and they will have a massive say in the direction the protocol is going to take in the future. What are other interesting news about the Graph? Basically, we have seen an interesting community Q&A in Telegram, and in my opinion I followed the Q&A, and it was at the beginning, it started with a lot of basic questions about the Graph network, which is quite important to introduce newcomers to the protocol, to the ecosystem, but there were also some quite important and quite exciting parts of the Q&A, which we are going to discuss in the next section of this podcast. So first of all, we had an interesting question about whether or not the Graph is planning to cooperate with other blockchain platforms like Dfinity, Polkadot, and Cosmos. And to be honest with you guys, I found the answer by Tegan quite interesting, so I'm going to quote it to you, because what she said was, quote unquote, the Graph hosted service supports Ethereum, IPFS, and POA. Currently, the Graph network supports Ethereum. This being said, the Graph is blockchain agnostic, and we are here to unite the entire Web3 ecosystem. We have been speaking to all of the layer 1 blockchains, many of whom have offered us grants to integrate the Graph's decentralized indexing layer on their blockchain. We plan to expand to other blockchains in the near future. End quote. So that was the quote by Tegan, and boy, I'm not kidding you when I'm telling you that the fact that they've been talking to all the top layer 1 blockchains has got me really excited. Also, the part about being blockchain agnostic is quite exciting because the entire protocol is more valuable when you can use it on a large number of different blockchains and not just Ethereum. So just imagine, if you will, the amount of data that one day could be running through the entire ecosystem, because the blockchain project is blockchain agnostic. And another question I want to highlight in this podcast that I found extremely interesting was about real-life use cases of the Graph protocol. So basically it was asked whether or not the Graph protocol is solving any real-life problems, which is quite important if you ask me, because there are so many interesting projects with fancy white papers that are not actually solving a real-life problem. So these projects may be interesting, but they do not contribute anything to solving something. And in this question it was also asked if there are important use cases that are worth highlighting. So Tegan answered this question again, and she highlighted how the Graph is solving a huge pain point for developers that are building applications in the Web3 ecosystem. So what she said in her response was that the Graph is currently one of the most used protocols, and I highlight this part, one of the most used protocols in the blockchain space today, right after Ethereum and IPFS. Now let this sink in, one of the most used protocols. This is for a brand new project. Okay, we know it's been in development for 3 years, but for a brand new project that just launched its mainnet is absolutely exciting news. And Tegan also mentioned in her response that there's a community of over 6,000 developers that have already built more than 3,400 subgraphs and have deployed these subgraphs for applications like Aragon, Balancer, Synthetics, DAO Stack, and Uniswap. So much about use cases, guys. And quite frankly, this is what's so exciting about the Graph. The Graph is not just a great idea or a brilliant white paper. Instead, it is a working product that was in development for more than 3 years, and it is already being used by some of the most well-known names in decentralized finance. So instead of just writing a white paper and just being built on promises, the team has already delivered. They have already captured the market. They have already customers that are well known, and they are already being used by really large projects. So what this means is that every time when you use Uniswap, every time you use Synthetics, you're basically interacting with the Graph network. Users may not notice it, but the Graph is what makes all these applications work. And I would go so far, if the Graph did not exist. No, I should rather say I would go so far as to say that if the Graph did not exist, these applications wouldn't be working at all, or wouldn't be working as good as they are right now. And by the way, Tegan also mentioned in her answer that the monthly query volume has been growing at a rate of more than 50% month over month, which are quite some spectacular statistics. This is very new with this Q&A. We never heard that many figures, so this is interesting to hear, interesting to read, and just exciting if you are part of the community. So I'm telling you, there are some exciting times ahead with this project. So let's wrap this very first podcast up with a quick look at where the Graph network stands right now in comparison to other projects on CoinMarketCap, because I know you guys, I know you are quite excited about price developments of this project, so let's have a quick look at CMC. And as we're speaking right now, the Graph token is listed in position number 50 on the CoinMarketCap list. But then again, I filtered this list for volume, and when we are looking at volume, the Graph is already listed on position number 29. So for a brand new project that has just launched its mainnet, this is straight into the top 50 is pretty exciting. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for joining in. I appreciate you all listening to this podcast, and I want to finish this podcast with one simple question. What was your own The Graph highlight in the last month? Let us know in the comment section below, and until then, happy delegating, happy indexing, and have a good time. Bye.